Reverse the Arrows, a podcast with Pastor Andy Meyer and Pastor Matt Day. They're asking bold questions. Is the modern church truly reflecting God's design? Are we following the biblical blueprint? Or have the arrows of ministry been pointing the wrong way? They're breaking down all things ministry, all things pastoral ministry, and all things church. Join the conversation as they challenge traditions, explore scripture, and seek God's vision for his church.
And we're back. Reverse the Arrows podcast, episode number 5, with Pastor Andy and Pastor Matt. But the thing is Pastor Andy's not here today. Pastor Andy has got his feet in the sand. He's down in Key West. So welcome again, Pastor Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And my name's Cody Reid, and I've been with Pastor Andy, who obviously has got a long run with Pastor Matt, but I've been with Pastor Andy under his leadership for about 6 years now. And anytime I get an opportunity to help Pastor Andy, I take it because he has poured so much into me and to my family. And so if I could help him a little bit by getting a little bit more out there this week, I figured I'd jump in and do that. So thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to do that, which kind of goes right in the line of what you guys talked about last week. I have so many questions about last week's episode, and I've prepared all of that. But at the very end of the episode, you made a comment about putting down the mic so other people can pick up the mic. And, anytime we step out in bold faith, I believe that God moves. And that's something that you talked about last week. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but I'm a living example of that right now.
Yeah, I preach at the beach, and I saw somebody that I knew, and they were like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I preach here at the beach." I said, "This is an open mic. Why don't you come and preach one time?" And he looked at me. This guy's been a seasoned Christian for long time.
Okay. Yeah.
And he goes, "Me? Like you want me to do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, like you could come and prepare a sermon and be able to do that." And he was like, I might do that. I really might. I might prepare something and do something like that. Will he? I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. But we've come. Okay, here's my thing. We have gotten so familiar with sitting.
Yeah.
Sitting.
Yeah.
That it's so hard to get up and go because we're constantly being fed.
Sure.
Right? Rather than us turning around and doing the feeding,
right?
Bible studies at work, Bible studies at Starbucks, Bible studies at Waffle House, Bible studies at this.
Sure.
Like you going into a restaurant, a bar and grill, and that's your service for the weekend, right? That's where you go to preach. So, you know what I'm saying? It's very difficult when people have been used to sitting for so long.
Yeah, and I think that really makes it easy for people to say no when situations come up, right? Like when Pastor Andy first asked me to do my first box church video, I knew that I was capable of doing it, right? Like I was prepared. I knew that God was working in my life and working in my family, and I knew that like just the practicality of it, that I could do it. But like internally, like I struggled. I'm like, man, no, I don't want to do this. Like I'm nervous. Like I'm never nervous to be in front of camera, but for this one, I was super nervous. So, and it's because I sat. I was never given an opportunity like that before.
That's right.
That comes with like every other church other than Andy's that I've ever attended. Like it's put on such high of a pedestal that it almost creates fear. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wants it until they get it. And then once they get it, they're like, ooh, like,
Well, so. Andy and I both, I feel like we've done a good job of pushing others.
Absolutely.
Just pushing them and say, no, it's your turn. No, I can't make it tonight. You take it, right?
Yeah.
And being able to push people, which leads to that jumping off the cliff and then ownership of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, I've sat under his teaching, and I've heard all of his stories, and I know about the firemen, and I know about the bring your own chair, the BYOC instead of the BYOB, and a lot of those stories were you, like you said, just pushing him out, like, hey, I'm done here, it's your turn.
Your turn.
Yeah. Well, before we go any deeper into episode 4, I said that Pastor Andy was on vacation.
Yeah.
And for him, and, I'm sure probably a lot of pastors, vacations don't come often. So if you were speaking to a pastor specifically, what would you tell them about like how important it is for rest? How important is it to get away from the church off of the Sunday. If they do go, they might go, Monday to Saturday so they can be back on Sunday. But how important is it for rest outside the church, I should say?
We've become so culturally centered on the word do.
Yeah.
Do, right? My identity is found in what I do.
Sure.
So the more I do, the better I feel about myself, right? Mm-hmm. But biblically speaking, the word is be. Be in the presence of Jesus.
Sure.
Right? Mary and Martha. Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus. Martha was working. Jesus said, Mary has chosen what is best. Right? Just sitting there, recognizing the presence of Jesus. And so I think we need to take respite as much as we can in the mornings or in the evenings if you're an evening person. My buddy gets up at 4 a.m. every single day to read his Bible. And he said, I get up at 4 a.m. because I know that I have no other distractions in my life that are going to keep me from hearing God's voice and his word. It's a discipline for him. But that's his retreat every day. That's his retreat every day. But Jesus had getaways. Look in the Bible. He retreated from the crowds. He's there with the Syrophoenician woman, right, that comes calling out to him. He's like, man, please send her away, but they had times of respite and being able to get away alone, and Jesus often did that. And I think it's important. I think it's that God has written that into our stories, right? On the seventh day, he rested.
Yep.
He
exactly.
rested. Did God have to rest?
No, I wouldn't think so.
He did it for us.
Yeah.
He did it for us, for our mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Christy, Andy's wife, obviously pushes that. But that's also something that, like, from the average churchgoer or just being a churchgoer, being a part of this church, that I've noticed about Pastor Andy is he does take time to vacation.
Yeah.
Where, again, previous churches that I've been at, the only time you see the pastor leave the church is when he's going to go preach at another church.
Right.
And so I think that, it's good that Pastor Andy gets an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
So talking about last week's episode, I've gathered up a series of questions, and these questions I feel like are going to be directed two different ways. We were talking about we just talked about what if you were speaking directly to a pastor. So I've got some to the church goer questions, and then I've got some to the pastor questions. And we can do rapid fire on this. We can spend as long as we want on each topic. But coming out of last week, kind of what it really means to be the church was kind of the overarching thing, right? I have a shirt on today. It says I don't go to church. I am the church. We don't go to church. We are the church. And it's something that being in Box Church and being with Pastor Andy that he's really taught me, something that I've never learned before. So in saying that, what does it really mean to be the church? And I like
Great
I said,
question.
Yeah.
I think every pastor would stand up in front of his congregation and say, hey, this is not the church. We are the church.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? Really, what does that mean? Sure. Because I was watching, I'll give you a great example. My wife loves the book Little Women. Okay, Louisa May Alcott. And I love the movie we were watching. They did a great remake of that book, Little Women.
Okay.
If you haven't seen it, it's wonderful.
I have not seen The Little Woman.
There is, on Christmas Day, they woke up, the girls woke up, their dad was in the Civil War. The mom had prepared this breakfast, and then she sat down at the table and she said, girls, there is a family, a needy family, down the street. They have nothing. They have no food. The children are starving. They are little. Would you mind giving them your breakfast this morning? And they all look at each other like, it's Christmas. So you see them all in picnic baskets with their cloaks on, and they're walking to this woman's house, this lady's house. And in the background, you see this white church with the steeple, and you see all the people that are going in. Wow. And it was just this moment of going, that's being the church. Sure. That's going to church on we go on Christmas morning. This is our family thing. They said, no, we're not doing this. We're doing this. conversely, when they gave their breakfast away, they came back to their home, and their home was filled with an even greater breakfast because their other neighbor saw what they were doing and gave his breakfast to them. Okay, that's just a snippet, right, of what it means to be the church. Pastors will say, hey, share your faith.
Yeah.
What they don't tell you is how to share your faith.
Yeah.
How to disciple somebody.
Right.
Right, Ephesians 4. Andy and I talk about Ephesians 4 all the time.
Yeah, he's been hung up there for this whole past year.
Well, because I gave it
June
to him.
Or July, June. It's almost July.
Yeah.
Ever since January, he's been talking about Ephesians 4.
Ephesians 4, right? That God gave them, their job is to equip the body to do the work of ministry. It never says that their job is to do the work. It simply says they are to equip the body to do the work of ministry. That, my friend, is being the church. You're opening up a can of worms, right? Because where in the Bible do you see greeters at the door? Where do you see nursery workers? Where do you see choir members in the fact of the New Testament, right? Where do you see hospitality stations? Where do you see all this stuff? You don't see that. But what you do see that in this is as they were persecuted, they were sharing their faith. As they were making disciples, they were making disciples who actually made other disciples. They were traveling all around the Aegean Sea. They left their jobs to go on mission here. They worked enough to have enough money to pay for this mission trip. Like they totally...
Communal too. It's not, you didn't say one person. That's a community of people.
A community of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever Pastor Andy says we don't go to church, we are the church, in a sense, it's not just know your Bible and know Jesus. It's come in the community into the church together and do it.
That's right.
It takes a heck of a lot of pressure out of one person or two or three people.
In the New Testament, it was not just at church either. They lived together.
Yeah, in homes.
They lived communally together.
Yeah.
They knew what time everybody was coming home. They knew if they had another mistress. They knew if they were beating their children or wives. They knew all of that.
Yeah.
So everything was out in the open and exposed.
Yeah. How messy is that? When you start taking people from outside your actual family and then calling them your family and actually being a family then, that's what we talk about here.
Be the church.
That's
right.
right.
Yes.
Last week you referred to a cruise ship, which is kind of fitting because my family right now, they're on a cruise ship. My mom and dad are on a cruise.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking about that because from a visual standpoint, like visually standing, like it kind of makes sense as the church as the cruise ship, right? And we're here to get fed, and we're going to have a big dinner, and we're going to go out to the pool, and we're going to go watch a concert. But in saying that, how do you think we, as the church, capital C church, can help get people up out of their seats and get them into the water? Just a couple practical things. What could we change? What could we do? We're talking about discipleship, getting out and getting disciples. And at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about just getting people in position to where they can do it. Maybe that's the answer to that question then.
Yeah. Leadership starts from the top down. So it is the pastor's job to be able to say, I am not the man. I am not the man who goes up to the mountain and hears from God. I am not the sole messenger for God, for you and your spiritual life, right?
Yeah.
So it is, you are a priest unto God. You are a saint in the family of God. You are a minister in the kingdom of God. You have a spiritual gift, and your spiritual gift is just as great as my spiritual gift. Paul makes no distinction about spiritual gifts. So it's empowering people, right? And it's constantly taking their eyes and going, why are we here? Why are we gathered? And I wrote this in my book. If gathering for the sake of gathering takes place without going, then God doesn't want our gathering. Yeah. It's an abomination to him if we're not taking that gathering and going, right? So that is the marketplace. mean, Paul was an entrepreneur, right? Paul was a leather worker. He was rubbing shoulders with not only his fellow marketplace people, but also all the clients and customers he had.
You're right.
He caused such a ruckus in Athens that it made its way up to Mars Hill, and they summoned him to come up to Mars Hill.
What a marketing strategy, right?
What a marketing strategy.
Yeah.
But like he was just there preaching the gospel
Sure.
as he was shoeing or as he was mending a saddle or doing whatever he was doing, right? Mending a tent. He was doing that. But I mean, Andy and I have talked at length about, we've seen pastors who walk off the stage, and they call it a stage, and they go get in their car and they're gone. Like they have no life with the church. They don't want to be bothered by anybody, right? Almost this celebrity, Elvis has left the building. I've seen this before.
VIP treatment to the dock after the cruise ship gets back to port, you
That's
know?
exactly right.
So do you think that we as a church, the church goer, is it possible that we've confused church attendance with obedience?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Just in the sense that's what we're programmed to do. And that's what, right? So everything now begins to rotate around the building. And if you're not at the building, you're missing out on your family, and you're missing out on what God is doing in our body, right? And so, yeah, it's almost like turning your back to the ocean so that you can focus on the little puddle, right? That's puddled on the sand, right? No, God's a rescuer. God rescued us. I mean, the mission of the church has never been to stay. It's always been to go, right? So one of the ways in which you allow people to do that is you start cutting all the stuff, all the entertainment on the boat. If it's an entertainment ship, they're like flies drawn to a light. They will constantly go to what's glowing and what's in and what's happening and hip and cool and all this stuff. If you shut down all the lights, if you shut down all the programming and all the busy work, and you made people focus not on the boat, but on the people that were perishing in the water, I think they would get the message. Right. The problem is they may take their little lifeboat and go to another cruise ship.
Well, and I think that's probably what happens most of the time, is people are like, hey, maybe this, I'm starting to see a little bit of light. Like I'm starting to see that maybe this isn't, what I'm called to be or where I'm called to be. And they generally just leave one cruise ship to jump on another, right? I wasn't going to go here yet, but during COVID is when I first met Pastor Andy. And when I first started attending the Exchange Church, I was attending regularly my home church. Like my home church offered a service on Saturday night, and Andy's services were on Sunday morning. So Saturday night I would go to my home church, I get my loud worship music, I get pumped up off all the bass, and then everything kind of slowed down a little bit more whenever I got to Pastor Andy's messages, but I could hear them better. It's like, it's amazing, right? I'm like, I was so drowned out from all the bass that I just received, I didn't really realize, and then I got yelled at by a pastor that was pumping me up because he's yelling through the microphone, and I come to Pastor Andy's sermons, and I'm actually starting to receive things. And that's where I first met you. Actually, you probably might not know it, but like your first or second time that you've preached at the Exchange Church, I was in attendance. I was there that day. And then I left there, and I followed you on social media, and that's when you were really big in the box church.
Yep.
You're making your box church videos. So as I continued to be obedient to just my work, I started to receive that, like, hey, instead of turning straight to the water, I got to the outside of the boat, and I looked into the boat, and I was like, whoa. Like now I'm still on the boat. Like I stayed at this church for over a year while I was still listening to Pastor Andy's sermons. Pastor Andy's pouring into me like, are you sure like this is church?
Right.
And I was like, yeah, this is church. I got kids ministry and I'm serving and everything's good. But that was a Saturday night, but on Sunday mornings, it made me look at things a little bit different. So when I went back to the boat, I was looking in and not out to sea yet, but I was looking into the boat. And then things started to shut down.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I had was, how do pastors confuse numerical growth with spiritual fruit?
Man, you're asking all the questions
Well,
in this podcast.
Hey, I come loaded. I got a lot of loaded questions.
My question is, how would they know?
How would they know spiritual fruit, or how would they know numerical numbers?
They know numerical numbers. Everybody counts all the time.
You got a counter of people.
But my
in chairs?
question is, how many people would he actually know that they're alive? So churches are right now, they are geared for, hi, how are you? I'm fine. Good to see you. Thanks. Sit down. When we leave, have a great week. Have a great day. I don't see you again until next week.
Right.
Right? That's how they are.
Right.
How many people does the pastor know like that? If there's 1,000 people in his church, how many people will he know? How would he know? Only thing he would hear is from, hey, I've heard that this person is doing this, or I've heard that. But I don't know how would you calculate spiritual growth in that way? Well, you talked with Pastor Andy. How many people, when he started Box Church, had actually read through the New Testament?
Well, that is spiritual fruit. That is definitely.
How many people that I've been to church with that actually have read the New Testament? I mean, I always ask this question: how many people in the last 5 years have come up to you as if you're lost and shared the gospel with you?
Never.
So
yeah.
You ask that question over and over again, and people go, never, 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 never. We're not sharing our faith.
Right.
We're not discipling. The model right now is come and then bring somebody with you, right? We will do the hard part of sharing the gospel. We will do all this stuff. We will get them plugged in. But it's almost like, no, I want to empower you to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this kind of goes in line with the same question, but what fears keep pastors from letting go of their pulpit and sharing the mic with others? We talked about sharing the mic. What do you think, like, fears? You were a pastor at a mega church or a relatively big church. I don't know. But like, what fears do you think that a pastor would have?
Well, my church growing up in Mobile, Alabama, we had who's who of pastors that came in and preached. My pastor regularly gave up his pulpit for Tony Evans and Charles Stanley and Adrian Rogers and David Jeremiah and Peter Lord and Leonard Ravenhill and you name it. Like, I heard the best of the best of the best of the best my whole growing up from that pulpit. I tell people I was discipled from the pulpit. And so when we ever had somebody being able to come in and preach, that I would be able to invite them in and be able to speak to our people in that way. I didn't have a fear. I think it becomes so much just insecurity. Like, I need to be in control, or I need to be the one that's the center of attention, or I need to be the show, right? The show has to go on.
Right.
I have to make sure the performance has to be done. And I hate to treat it that way, but oftentimes it is.
Sure.
Right? And so, and we're talking about a traditional model, right? The New Testament model was go, where Timothy would go and Titus would go. When he tells Titus, he says, I'm leaving you on the island of Crete to continue the work that we were doing.
Right.
Like, he empowers them to go to Crete and to finish the work that was being done. He tells people in Corinth, I can't wait to send Apollos to you. I can't wait to send Timothy to you. Like, it was always in preparation for Paul coming, or in his stead, that he did that. But you're talking about apples and oranges. The church today and the church in the New Testament, they are incongruent. They do not match up. They are apples and oranges in everything that they were doing, the application of that they were doing. And so you're talking about a pulpit. They didn't have pulpits in the New Testament. You're talking about, Jesus preached from a hillside.
Yeah.
Right? It was always open air preaching. And then when he preached in the synagogue, he made people so mad that they would take him to a cliff and want to throw him off the cliff.
Right.
So, but in that sense, if we're not training people to go and preach and go and do, then we are doing a disservice to the kingdom of God.
Right.
Right? Because Paul says, what is my motivation? What is my motivation for sharing the gospel with you? I do it because of the fearful responsibility before the Lord.
Right.
He wasn't talking about their fearful day of judgment or anything like that.
No.
He says that we have to stand before God as leaders. It is I do it from a fearful responsibility from the Lord. Yeah.
Last week's episode, we ended talking about Larry. And I know how proud you are of our boy Larry stepping out in faith and doing a Bible study at work. But with that said, that just goes to show, like, Larry was on the cruise ship. Larry got off. He got in the water. Andy had him on a lifeboat for a while before he actually jumped in the water. But it's a really good, like, visual thing, especially for me, thinking about it like that. Andy's not the cruise ship captain. Andy was the lifeboat captain for Larry, and then Larry finally got in. So that was really cool for you and Pastor Andy to talk about last week.
Well, the guy that I saw at the beach that I invited to come and preach one Saturday night where I preach, and he said, oh, you know a guy that he lives in my development or whatever else, my little, whatever it is, wherever he lives, trailer kind of area. And he goes, yeah, I know him. And he's come to hear you preach. And yes, he has. And I said, so have you started a Bible study where you are? And he was like, man, the Lord is, I've been kind of thinking about that. And I'm like, here's your invitation. Don't think anymore. The Holy Spirit's telling you to do this.
Yeah.
Do it.
Do it.
Start a Bible study right where you are. And he was like, I probably will do that. But this guy's been a believer for 50 years.
Sure. And the cool thing about that is, especially if it's at your house, is if you just open your doors and expect nothing else, right? Hey, I'm going to have a box church. I'm going to have a Bible study on Sunday morning or on Thursday night. If you want to come. It feels so good. And when you don't have to count how many people are coming or be expectant that you're going to have to, our best Bible studies were when we had very little amount of people in the room,
Yeah.
on the off days, on the days that not a lot of people could make it.
Yeah.
So,
it's great.
yeah, just get it started. Next week, you and Pastor Andy are back. Well, not next week, but next episode, you and Pastor Andy are back. And I think you guys have a pretty heady discussion on our plate. So I don't know that you want to spoil that, but if you want to close this out with anything as we get prepared for episode number 6.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the next coming episode because Andy was the one who told me while he was in church culture, entrenched in church culture, he talked about this terminology called scaffolding. And I've used this term. Like, have you heard of this term? And people have shook their head going, yes, I've heard it. It's even come out on social media. But pastors, we're going to dive into this. And I told you it makes me angry every time I hear it because it is usury of the people of God. It is not empowering and discipling.
Sure.
It's usury. It's scaffolding that you climb on them and disregard them when they're no longer necessary to your movement. Are you kidding me?
Yep.
Show me that in the New Testament. So this is what we'll talk about. I wanted to have a whole episode of this, and I want to expose some of this because this is not right.
No, not at all. Well, I'll let you and Pastor Andy get into it. Again, thank you for giving me a mic tonight and the opportunity to talk through reversing the arrows.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.